Hari Om. Holy Geeta reading, chapter 2, verse 24. All pervading is a short term of inconceivable depth of significance. All pervading is that which pervades everywhere, and therefore there is nothing that is not pervaded by the all pervasive. The eternal truth envelops all. The all pervading has no shape, since that which has a shape is conditioned all along its outline by something other than itself. A man with a head, a trunk, and limbs has a shape because all around him, along his outline, is space, which is something other than the carbon material of his skull and bones. A thing conditioned should necessarily have a form of its own by the term all pervading. It is meant that it has only itself all round it and at all places, and that it is unconditioned by anything other than itself. A truth that is thus eternal, nitya, homogeneous, and all pervading sarvagataha must necessarily be stable, sthano, because no change can ever take place in it. That which is thus stable must be firm, achalaha, for it cannot shake or move. Since movement implies the transfer of thing from one set of time and place to another set of time and place, then, since the self is all pervading, there is no spot in space or period in time where it is not already. And therefore, just as I cannot move myself in myself, the self cannot move anywhere. A motionless thing is indeed firm, achalaha. Here, the two terms stable, sthanu, and firm, achalaha, may seem to be a tautology, both having almost the same meaning, but the former means stability at the base, as in the case of a banyan tree. At the base of the trunk it is stable, and yet at the top it is moving. Thus it is stable at the base and firm at the top. In its infinite glory, it has no moment anywhere. Sanatana means that which is ancient. The implication of this term can fall under two categories, the obvious and the suggestive. The obvious meaning indicates that the self is not new, nutanaha, but it is ancient, and therefore we as students of Brahma Vidya did not hesitate to accept it, because we necessarily would. In the theory was a modern ideology which was yet to be verified by observed experimental data. In its suggestiveness, the term Sanatana implies that the self is unconditioned by time and place, perfection gained, whether it is in India or at the North Pole, in the present generation, or in the chaste periods of the Vedic culture, in all places and at all times, by all seers in all the religions of the world. The self-experience at the time of God realization can only be one and the same. Moreover, Bhagavan adds, 25. This self is said to be unmanifest, unthinkable, and unchangeable. Therefore, knowing this to be such, you should not grieve. अव्यक्तो यमचिन्त्योऽयमविकार्यो यमुच्यते तस्मादेव मिदित्वैनं नाम शोचितुमर्हसि. This eternal or pervading self is certainly unmanifest, unthinkable, and unchangeable, and therefore, having known this truth in its essential nature, Krishna argues that it is neither possible to kill nor to get really killed. Each of these terms is quite expressive of certain logical truths, unmanifest. The five great elements that we know, when they become subtler, they lose their capacity to impinge themselves upon our sense perceptions. Considered from east, earth to air, we find the elements progressively getting subtler for our perceptions, and finally, ether or space by itself cannot be perceived directly by our senses at all. However, the five great elements can, to some extent, be perceived through our sense organs, but the cause of ether, the subtlest of the five elements, is too subtle for our perception, and therefore we will have to assume that it is unmanifest. A thing is called manifest when we perceive it through one or the other of our sense organs. That which is beyond all the five sense organs is called unmanifest. I cannot see, smell, hear, taste, or touch a full grown mango tree in a mango seed, and yet I know that the seed is the cause for the tree. Under the circumstances, the tree is said to be in an unmanifest condition within the seed. Similarly, when they say that truth is unmanifest, they only through any of our sense organs. In the Upanishads, we have exhaustive explanations of why our senses cannot have the eternal as an object of sense perceptions. It is the very subject because of which the sense organs can perceive. Unthinkable. After denying the sense organs any play in the field of truth, we are told that the human mind also cannot think, nor can the human intellect ruminate over and comprehend the infinite, the self being the very life that energizes the mind and the intellect, which by themselves are inert and sentient. It becomes obvious that the mind and intellect cannot make the self an object of their comprehension. A telescope gazer cannot see himself with his telescope. He cannot be at once the seen word unthinkable is to be understood as meaning incomprehensible by the mind and the intellect of the seeker, unchangeable. This term indicates that the self is without parts, because things that have parts in themselves are things which have form, and those that have form must necessarily come under the category of the finite and exhibit in themselves various modifications and changes. By these terms, truth is declared as immutable, unmanifest, unthinkable, and unchangeable. Krishna thus advises Arjuna to end his grief. He who understands the eternal nature of the self can have neither the occasion nor recognize others as the slain. Granting that the self is not everlasting, The Lord proceeds to give the materialist's points of view. But even if you think of him as being constantly born and constantly dying, even then, O mighty armed, you should not grieve. This and the following stanzas are arguments in which the materialist's point of view has been, for the purpose of argument, presented here by Krishna. According to them, direct perception alone is an authority for belief. With this standard for their knowledge, when they try to measure life, they have to accept it as a constant flux of infinite births and an infinite deaths. अथ चैनं नित्यजातं नित्यं वा मन्यसे मृतं तथापि त्वं महाबाहो नैवं शोचितुमर्हसि. Things are born and they die away. This world of birth and death is constant, and a constant change is life to them. Krishna argues that if life is but a constant repetition of births and deaths, then also the hero, Mahabahu, that you are, you do not deserve to grieve on this. Indeed, certain is death for the born, and certain is birth for the dead. Therefore, over the inevitable, you should not grieve. जातस्य हि ध्रुवो मृत्युर्ध्रुवं जन्म मृतस्य च तस्मादपरिहार्यर्थे न त्वं शोचितुमर्हसि. That which is born must die, and after death things are born again. Here, Krishna continues to view the whole situation from the materialist's angle. The materialists take life to be a constant flood of appearance from nowhere and disappearing into nowhere. The theists believe that the embodiments are taken up by the individual ego in order that it may eke out its experiences and learn to grow in its understanding of life and ultimately realize the truth behind it all. Thus, this is a common meeting point of both the theists and the atheists, that both of them believe life to be a continuous chain of birth and death. Thus, if life being in its very nature a stream of births and deaths, against this inevitable arrangement, no intelligent man should mourn. Standing out in the blazing summer sun, one must indeed be stupid to complain against its heat and glare. Similarly, having come to life, to complain against the very nature of life is indeed an. On this score also, to weep is to admit one's own ignorance. Krishna's life on the whole is a message of cheer and joy. His doctrine of life is an insistence upon to weep is folly and to smile is wisdom. Keep smiling seems to be Krishna's philosophy put into words, and that is why, upon seeing his dear friend weeping in life, the Lord gets whipped up, as it were, to an enthusiasm to save Arjun from his delusions and bring him back to the true purpose of life. The following 10 verses give the common man's view. Shankara says, neither is it prior to grieve over, neither it is proper to grieve over beings which are mere combinations of material causes and effects, for beings unmanifest in the beginning and unmanifest again in their end seem to be manifest in the middle. O Bharata, what then is there to grieve about? From this stanza onwards, we have a beautiful presentation of the whole problem of Arjun from the standpoint of the man of the world. In these 10 verses, Krishna explains the problem as viewed through the goggles of a common man of the world and valued by his intellectual judgment. The material world of objects strictly follows the law of causation. The world of effects arises from the world of causes. In a majority of cases, the effects are manifest and the causes are unmanifest. The project from the unmanifest to the manifest is the program of creation of a thing, strictly followed the law of causation. Thus, the manifest world of today was unmanifest before its creation, and now for the time being it is available for cognition as fully manifest, only to fade away soon into the unmanifest again. It amounts to saying that the present came from the unknown and shall return to the unknown. Even if viewed thus, why should one mourn? For the spokes of the wheel that turns eternally must come down only to rise up again. Avyaktarini Bhutani Vyakta Madhyani Bharata Avyaktaridhananyava Tatrata Paridevana. Again, the dream children who were unmanifest before and which came to manifestation during the dream become manifest again, unmanifest again upon waking up. Why mourn, O you bachelor, for a wife whom you had never married, who had disappeared with your dream, with the children unborn who dissolved away with your dream? If there be, as Krishna says, an infinite eternal truth, which is changeless and deathless, in which alone this drama of change occurs, this world of birth and death spins, how is it that we are not able to realize it even though it is explained to us repeatedly? According to Shankara, Lord Krishna here feels that he should not blame Arjun for his incapacity to understand the self. Shankara says the self just spoken of is very difficult to realize. Why should blame you alone while the cause, that is ignorance, is common to all? One may ask, how is it that the self is so difficult to realize? The Lord says, one sees this as a wonder, another speaks of this as a wonder, another hears of this as a wonder, yet having heard, none understands this at all. आश्चर्यवत् पश्यति कश्चिदेन आश्चर्यवत् वदति तथैव चान्यः आश्चर्यवच्चैनमन्यः शृणोति श्रुत्वाप्येनं वेद न चैव कश्चित्. The eternal absolute is explained to us as infinite, all-knowing and all-blissful. Our experience of ourselves is that we are finite, ignorant and miserable. Thus, between the reality which is ourself and what we experience ourselves to be, there seems to be as much of a difference as between heat and cold, light and darkness. Why is it that we are not able to recognize the self, which is our real nature? In our ignorance, when we try to pursue the truth, it seems to be a goal to be reached at some distant place during a distant period of time. But in fact, if we are to believe the Lord's words, the self being our essential nature, we are never far from it. A mortal is as far away from immortality as the sinner is as far removed from a saint, as the imperfect is as far removed from perfection, as the dreamer is from the waker. Man awakened to the self's glory is God. God, forgetful of his own glory, is the deluded man. To the ego, the very existence of the subtler self beyond the body, the mind, and the intellect is an idea that cannot even be conceived of. When a mortal, through the techniques of self perfection, comes to recognize himself to be the self, he is struck with a wondrous ecstasy of that supra-sensuous experience. The emotion of wonder, when arises in the mind, has the capacity to black out for the time being all cognitions. The individual who has been struck with wonder forgets himself and becomes for the moment one with the very emotion. As an experiment, try to completely surprise somebody and quietly watch his attitude with the mouth open and his unseeing eyes protruding out, every nerve in him stretched up the highest tension. The victim of wonderment stands fixed to the spot as a statue carved in moist, cold flesh. The same is the thrilled hush of lived joy in the temple of experience, when the self all alone comes to live as the self, and therefore the great rishis of older times borrowed the term wonderment to indicate to the student what exactly would be the condition of his personality layers at the moment when his ego drops off from the resplendent infinite form of the self. The true knowledge makes a man realize that he is the soul with a body. But now, in his ignorance, he thinks that he is a body with a soul. Those who listen well are encouraged to reflect upon what they have heard and to meditate until they realize the self. The unintelligent listeners also feel encouraged by the very same statement expressing the rarity of this knowledge to make repeated attempts at listening, Shravan, continuous reflection, Manam, and long contemplation, Vidyasan. Here the Lord concludes the subject on this section thus 30. This, the indweller in the body of everyone, is ever indestructible, O Bharat, and therefore we should not grieve for any creature. देहि तस्मात् सर्वाणि भूतानि न त्वं शोषितुमर्हसि. The subtle reality in each body, that is the indwelling spirit in every creature, is eternal and indestructible. All that is destroyed is only the container, the finite matter envelopment. Therefore, Arjun has been advised that he should not grieve upon facing his enemies and in the great battle even killing them, if need be, to bring out this idea. The entire earlier section has been used by Krishna, wherein he argued so well to establish the eternal nature of the soul and the finite nature of the bodies. Shankara rightly concludes that this stanza winds up the entire section opened in verse 11. In this verse, it has been shown that from the standpoint of absolute attachment, not only from the standpoint of absolute truth, but are also 31. Further looking at thine own beauty, thou ought not to waver, for there is nothing higher for a Kshatriya than a righteous war. स्वधर्ममपि चावेक्ष न विकम्पितुमर्हसि धर्मस्य युद्धात् श्रेयः क्षत्रियस्य न विद्यते. Mahabharat Udyog Parva 72:18 says, the sin that is committed by killing one who does not deserve to be killed is as great as the sin of not killing one who deserves to be killed. Arjun's personal call of character, Swadharma, is that of a leader of his generation, Kshatriya, and as such, when his generation is called upon to answer a challenge of an organized un-Aryan force Adharma, it is his duty not to waver, but to fight and defend his sacred national culture. To the leaders of people, there can be nothing nobler than to get a glorious chance to fight for a righteous cause. Hence, Arjun has been called upon to fight a righteous war, wherein his enemies are the true aggressors. Therefore, it is said that such a chance comes indeed only to a lucky few, that a king must fight on such an occasion is vividly brought out in the Mahabharata. Regarding the other persons, why the battle should be fought, the Lord says, 32. Happy indeed are the Kshatriyas, O Partha, who are called to fight in such a battle that comes of itself as an open door to heaven. Kshatriya is not the name of a caste, it merely indicates a certain quality of the mental vasanas in the individual. Those who have an ever bubbling enthusiasm to defend the weak and the poor, besides their own national culture, from all threats of such leaders of men are not allowed to be tyrants and aggressors according to the code of morality of the Hindus, but at the same time a cold, feminine, and cowardly. Non resistance is not the spirit of the Hindu tradition. In all cases where the Hindu nation is forced to wage a war on the principles of righteousness, Upapannam, leaders of India are ordered to fight in defense of their culture and to consider themselves fortunate to get the chance to serve the country. Such battlefields are the wide open gates to heaven for the defending heroes who fight diligently on the side of Dharma. It is interesting to note how Lord Krishna, in the scheme of his exhortations, comes down slowly from the highest pinnacles of Vedantic ideologies to the lower planes of material philosophy and still lower down to the point of view of an average worldly man. From all different levels, he views the problem and presents Arjuna with the same logical conclusion that the war must be fought. It is indeed a fact that it is your duty, and now, in case you renounce it and run away from the battlefield, then 33. But if you will not fight this righteous fame, you shall incur sin. अथ चेतुमिमं धर्म्यं संग्रामं न करिष्यसि ततस्त्वधर्मं कीर्तिं च हित्वा पापं वाप्स्यसि. In case you refuse to engage yourself in this glorious war, then not only will you be renounced your own personal call of character, swadharma, and honor in not having fulfilled your noble duty, but will also incur a positive sin. Not to face this army of un-Aryan forces is as much sinful as to murder those who do not deserve such a treatment. Dharma, as we have already explained in the law of being, explained is the law of being. Every living creature has taken up its form and has come into the world of objects for one great purpose, which is to gain an exhaustion of its existing mental impressions, the bundle of vasanas, which with which all individual has arrived into a particular incarnation is called his personal call of character. Swadharma, when classified thus, Arjun falls within the group of the kingly Kshatriya who are characterized by adventurous heroism and an insatiable thirst for honor and fame. Chances provided by life is to reject and refuse the chances provided by for vasana catharsis. By not exhausting the old vasanas, one will be living under a high vasana pressure when the existing tendencies are crowded out by the influx of new tendencies. Not fighting the war, Arjun may run away from the field, but he will certainly come to regret his last chance since his mind is so composed that he can find complete relief and solace only by living the intensely dangerous life of the battlefield. A boy with tendencies for art cannot be successfully trained to be artists, since these are contrary to his nature. If an over-anxious parent in the name of love projects upon a growing child his own intentions and plans out of love, projects upon a growing child his own intentions and plans, we invariably find that a young boy will have a crushed personality. Examples of this type are seen everywhere in the world, especially in the spiritual field. There are many seekers with over enthusiasm for spiritual development who, at the mere appearance of a misery or at the threat of a sorrow, decide to run. They invariably end up in the lifelong tragic disaster. They have within them sensuous vasanas which can be satisfied only in the embrace of a family under the roof of their own tenement. But rejecting them all, they reach the Himalayan caves, and then all day through they can neither meditate upon the God nor find a field for sensuous enjoyment. Naturally, they entertain more and more agitations in their mind, otherwise called sin, papa. Sin is which it acts contrary to its essential nature as the self. Any act of sensuousness which the mind pants for in the world of objects, hoping to get thereby a joy and satisfaction, creates necessarily within itself increasing agitations, and this type of a mistake of the mind is called a sin. Continuing thus, not only will you have given up your duty and fame, but also people too will recount your everlasting dishonor, and to the one who has been honored, dishonor is more than death. To a famous hero, dishonor is worse than death. This is another अकीर्तिं चापि भूतानि कथयिष्यन्ति ते व्ययां ते अव्ययां सम्भावितस्य च कीर्तिर्मरणादतिरिच्यते. This is another argument that Krishna brings forth to persuade his friend to give up his hesitation in fighting the great war. The general import is that if Arjun were to abandon the fight, he could do so only because of his righteous. Certainly, there is an undercurrent of sympathy in Krishna's words as he realizes that however great a hero Arjun might be, even he could be weakened by wrong emotionalism. Moreover, the great battalion of 35, the great battalion will think that you have drawn you have withdrawn from the battle through fear, and you will look down, and you will be looked down upon by those who had thought much of you and your heroism in the past. Continuing the common man's point of view arguments. भयाद्रणादुपरतं मन्स्यन्ते त्वां महारथाः येषां च त्वं बहुमतो भूत्वा यास्यसि लाघवम्. Continuing the common man's point of view arguments, Krishna says here that not only will the world blame him and history recount his infamy, but immediately the great warriors and battalion commanders, Maharathas, in the enemy lines will also start ridiculing him. They will laugh and say that the great archer Arjun ran away from the battlefront because of sheer cowardice. They will interpret his conscientious objections against the fratricidal war as an act of cowardice of a hero during a weak moment in his life. No soldier can stand such dishonor, especially when it comes from one's own equals among the enemy lines. Moreover, 36, and many unspeakable words will your enemies speak, cavilling about your powers. What can be more painful than this? अवाच्य वादांश बहून् वदिष्यन्ति तवाहिताः निन्दन्तस्तव सामर्थ्यं ततो दुःखतरम्. Obviously reacting well to these arguments, Krishna drives home to him the folly of running away from the battlefront. It will be intolerable when his enemies scandalize his glorious name and his chivalry in foul language, too indecent even for words. Not only will history record for all times his cowardly retreat, but even while he lives, he will be pointed out and laughed at as a hero who ran away from the battlefield. 37. Slain, you will obtain heaven, victorious, you will enjoy the earth. Therefore stand up, O son of Kunti, determined to fight. हतो प्राप्स्यसि स्वर्गं जित्वा वा मोक्षसे महिम् तस्मादुत्तिष्ठ कौन्तेय युद्धाय कृतनिश्चयः. Shlok 30 to 37, apart from the philosophical arguments given from Shloka 11 onwards. In case he has to give up his life on the war front while fighting for such a noble cause, he shall certainly enter the heaven of the heroes, Veera Swarga, to stay and to enjoy there for aeons. In case he wins, he shall certainly come to rule over the kingdom and enjoy in the world, and therefore he shall go to heaven to enjoy there the status of a mighty hero who fought championing the cause of Dharma. Either way he will gain, because with the war ends of the Pandavas being stoutly righteous. Therefore, meaning for all the reasons so far enumerated, arise resolved to fight. Earlier on, Arjun, after expressing his feelings of grief and despair, had sat inert and motionless upon throwing down his weapons. Krishna asks his friend to come out of this moodiness and rejection and be determined to fight the noble war. The call to war is the call to war is justified because of the particular situation in the Mahabharata wherein the Gita was given out. Generalizing the call of Krishna, we may say that it is a divine call to man to discard his melancholy rejections in the face of life's challenges and to come forward to play as best as he can the game of life with a firm determination to strive and to win. In this line, we have the universality of the Gita explicitly brought out for those who understand and find its vast application to the community of man. Now, listen to that advice I offer to you on your inner attitude, where you fight the battle. 38. Having made place the same, engage in battle for the sake of battle. Thus you shall not incur sin. सुख दुखे समय कृत्वा लाभा लाभो जया जयो ततो युद्धाय युजस्व नैवं पापमवाप्स्यसि. From this stanza onwards, we have a slight hint about the technique of Karma Yoga as explained in the Gita. In the introduction, we have stated that the second chapter is almost a summary of the whole Gita. Later on, we shall see how the path of devotion is also indicated in brief in this very chapter. In this stanza, we have Krishna's first direct statement on the technique of self. Study of it will be extremely fruitful to all students of the Gita. The three pairs of opposites mentioned here are distinct experiences at the three levels of our mortal existence. Pleasure and pain are the intellectual awareness of experiences, favorable and unfavorable. Gain and loss conceptions indicate the mental zone, where we feel the joys of meeting and the sorrows of parting. Conquest and defeat indicate the physical fields, wherein at the level of the body we ourselves win or let others win. The advice that Krishna gives is that one must learn to keep oneself in equilibrium in all these different vicissitudes at the respective levels of existence. If one were to enter the sea for a bath, one must know the art of sea bathing, or even the inside of the person, and may even sweep him off his feet and drag him to the watery wave. But he who knows the art of saving himself by ducking beneath the mighty waves or by riding over the lesser ones alone can enjoy a sea bath. To hope for all the waves to end or to expect the waves not to trouble one while one is in the sea is to order the sea to be something other than itself for one's convenience. This is exactly what a foolish man does in life. He expects life to be without waves, but life is ever full of waves. Pleasure and pain, gain and loss, conquest and defeat must arise in the waters of life, or else it is a complete stagnation. It is almost a death. If life be thus a tossing, stormy sea at all times, and it should be so, then we who have entered life must know the art of living it, being unaffected either by the rising crests or by the sinking hollows in it. To identify ourselves with any surface and not just to stand at astride like a lighthouse which has its foundation built on the bedrock of the very sea. Here Krishna advises Arjun and keep himself unaffected Arjun while inviting him to fight and he should enter the contest and keep himself unaffected by the usual dissipating mental tendencies that come to everyone while in activity. This equanimity of the mind alone can bring Jaya Shri Ram, Jaya Raghuram, Janaki Jeevan Sundar Ram, Devaganarchita. जय श्री राम जय रघुराम जानकी जीवन सुंदर राम देव. It is very well known that in all activities, inspired work gathers to itself a texture of divine perfection which cannot be imitated or oft repeated. But a poet, be he a poet or an artist, a doctor or a speaker, irrespective of his profession, whenever an individual is at his best, his masterpiece is always accepted by all as a work of inspiration. When we thus work with the thrilled ecstasy of an unknown mood called inspiration, the ideas, thoughts, and activity that come out of us have a ringing beauty of their own, which cannot be otherwise mechanically repeated by us. Thus, Da Vinci could not repeat for a second time and copy another piece of canvas the enigmatic smile of his Mona Lisa. Keats' pen could no more recapture for a second time the song of the nightingale in its flight. Beethoven could never again beat out of his faithful piano a second moonlight sonata. Lord Krishna himself, when requested by Arjun after the war to repeat the Gita, admitted his inability to do so. To the Western mind and understanding, inspiration is an accidental and mysterious happening over which the mortal has no control at all. To the Eastern rishis, inspired living is the real godly destiny of man. When he lives in perfect unison with the self within, a balanced life wherein we live as unaffected witness of even our own mind and intellect is the realm of self forgetfulness, where instead of becoming inefficient, our profession gathers the scintillating glow of a new dawn. This extra aura in any achievement is that which raises an ordinary success to an inspired achievement. The yogis of ancient Hindu lore discovered a technique whereby the mind and intellect could be consciously brought to a steadiness and poise. This technique is called yoga. The Hindus of the Vedic period knew, practiced, and lived it. With their incomparable achievements, they provided for their country the golden era of the Hindus. The philosophy of a country like India during the Vedic period, but it has its applications in all walks of life. If it fails in its all round application, it cannot be a philosophy. A theory of life which has no universal application can at best be appreciated as the noble opinion of an individual, which may have its own limited application, but it can never be accepted as a philosophy. In the entire scheme of Bhagwan's arguments so far, he has provided Arjun with all the necessary reasons which Healthy intellect should discover for itself before it comes to a reliable judgment upon the outer happenings. A mere spiritual consideration should not be the last word in the evaluation of all material situations. Every challenge should be estimated from the spiritual standpoint as well as from the intellectual standpoint of reason, from the emotional level of ethics and morality, and from the physical level of tradition and custom. If all these considerations, without any contradiction, indicate a solitary truth, then that is surely the divine path that one should pursue at all costs. Arjun came to the delusory miscalculation of the situation because he evaluated the war only from the level of his sentiments. The opposing forces were teaming with his relations. To kill and exterminate them was indeed against the ethical point of view. But this emotionalism overpowered him, and at this moment of his total inward chaos, he completely lost sight of the other considerations that would have helped him to regain his balance. He surrendered as a mind should to Krishna, the inner discriminating capacity. Therefore, the Lord, having undertaken to guide Arjun, provides him with all the available data gathered from different points of view. Throughout the Gita, Krishna plays the part of the discriminative intellect in an individual, a true charioteer in the Upanishad sense of the term. After thus placing all the possible points of view about the problem, the spiritual, the intellectual, the ethical, and the traditional, for Arjun's consideration, Krishna concludes in the earlier stanza that Arjuna must fight. In this stanza, Krishna tries to explain how he should conduct himself in this undertaking. It has been said that he should fight the war with a perfect detachment from all anxieties which generally come to an individual when he identifies himself with the non self, anatma, meaning that at the level of his intellect with the concept of pain and pleasure, at the level of his mind with the fears of gain and loss, and at his body level with the restlessness of conquest and defeat. Equanimity in all such mental challenges is a factor that ensures true success in life. We have explained earlier how the human mind is to be kept open while working in its given field of life so that while living in the midst of life's battle, it can exhaust the vasanas that are already in it. This purgation, that is catharsis, of the soul is the compelling purpose for which every living creature has arrived on the platform of manifest life. Viewed thus, each individual living creature, plant, animal, or human, is but a bundle of vasanas. The equanimity in the face of all situations, as advised here, is the secret method of keeping the mind ever open for its outflow. When it gets clouded by the ego sense and the egoistic desires, the outflow is choked and new tendencies start flooding it. The ego is born when an individual starts getting upset at all. These pairs of opposites down dvandvas, such as joy and sorrow, etc. The attempt to keep equanimous is successful only if action is detached from the ego. Thus, mental purification Vasana catharsis is the benign result of real living and right action, and this is yoga in full detail as Karma Yoga. The philosophical theory of truth was described in the very opening of the Lord's message, and in order to drive home those conclusions into the practical mind of a man of action, namely Arjun, Lord Krishna gave arguments from the standpoint of the common man. Ultimately, he concluded that Arjun must fight and also explained as to what attitude he should fight with. Practical religion consists in living the philosophy one has understood. Hereafter, the scheme of the Gita in the chapter is to explain the techniques of living the Vedantic philosophy in and through Karma Yoga. Hence, says the Lord. Hari Om. ओम श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरवे नमः. हरि ओम. श्री सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय.